What's happening, people? It is Brian Alzer with NEVERsate.com, and for today's video, it is going to be the first part of a three-part series where I cover very basic changes that you can make in your deadlift that are hopefully going to lead to some pretty astounding results. Also, today's video is especially romantic. Not because of my armpit, because of the fire. Now, when it comes to deadlift, I know that each and every single one of us has our own tried and true things that we've used forever. They've worked in the past. We want to stick with them. And if that is still working for you, if after every single training cycle, you're able to break your deadlift PR and it's just marching right along, then please don't change anything. There's absolutely no reason to try to fix something that isn't necessarily broke. However, if you are finding yourself a little frustrated with your deadlift progress, or maybe you've hit some sort of plateau, or maybe even stalled, then you might want to give some things I'm talking about in this video a try, because you might be astounded at how they can help. All right, so jumping right in, each one of these three parts is going to cover a basic principle that you can apply to your deadlift in hopes of getting some real change. Now, for today's video, the first principle that I want to talk about is bringing everything in. Now, I know that sounds very simple and basic, but trust me, we're gonna cover a lot of ground by the end of this thing. Now, before I really get into details here, I think the most obvious example of how bringing things in on a deadlift can make you stronger is if you look at the difference between your snatch grip deadlift and your conventional deadlift and the power output between the two. Now, obviously, in the snatch grip deadlift, you are much weaker. You can't hold onto the bar. There are a lot of things going on there, and you are all stretched out. So bringing things in obviously makes you stronger. So the idea of this video is to take wherever your deadlift currently is and see what we can bring in to increase your leverages, to help you with biomechanical strength, in hopes that maybe there's just a few very simple things that you can change, which might lead to pretty astounding results. So for this video, I'm gonna start at the ground and work my way up, which means the very first thing that I'm gonna talk about bringing in is going to be your stance. Now, before you click off the video, guys, remember I am not talking about big drastic changes here. Maybe an inch here, an inch there. Very minuscule changes can lead to very big results when we're talking about this. But this one in particular is a little bit strange because it doesn't seem to matter who I ask to include myself. We all feel that we will be as strong as possible with our feet underneath our shoulders. We feel like that's where you can generate the most force. That's where you feel that you're gonna do your best deadlift possible. However, if someone challenges me to dunk a basketball or do a vertical jump test, and you actually look at where my feet leave the ground, they are drastically closer than my shoulder width apart, which means that's where my body naturally generates the most force. However, when it comes to doing something like a deadlift, I kind of throw that all out the window because of how I feel, although that's not how I perform. So for most athletes, to include myself, if I bring my feet in just a little bit, then I find that I can get more leg drive, and I'm actually using a lot more muscle groups than I would be if they were a little bit wider, where I feel better. The only thing that I will say is when you do bring your feet in, make sure that you point your toes out an appropriate amount so that your knees can still track with the bending of your legs. Every so often you hear a complaint about knee pain when bringing the stance in, but often that's just because the toes did not point out enough, and so the knees are not tracking the way they're actually supposed to, and that's where the pain's coming from. If they just adjust the toes a little bit, typically that pain goes completely away and the deadlift continues to rise. Moving our way up the body, if your stance came in, that means your legs come in, and if your legs come in, that means that your hands should come in. Guys, your hands should be as close to your body as they possibly can be without interfering with the actual deadlift movement. When you think about the snatch grip deadlift, one of the reasons why it's so hard is because you're sticking yourself in a deficit by sliding your hands further and further out, which is lowering your body. So as you slide your hands in, you can bring your body up further because you're shortening the range of motion. So if your legs come in a little bit, then your hands come in a little bit, you just shorten the range of motion on your deadlift. So between the last cue, where you're gonna be getting more leg drive, and then this cue where you're actually shortening the range of motion, for many people, they will find it a lot easier to break the bar off of the ground, which for many of us is pretty much the hardest part of the lift. Another massive advantage to bring your hands in is that it makes it easier to lock your lats in. Now, locking your lats in is going to be something that I talk about in length during the part 2 of this series. But the basic idea here is that if you have any room in your armpit area, if your lats are not locked in down and back, if there's any room there, then you are not nearly as strong as you potentially could be. You essentially want to be using your rear delts to be giving yourself a belly hug. Sometimes you hear the cue of sticking your shoulder blades in your back pockets or bending the bar across your shins, but all of it means the same thing, and it basically means you're gonna take your lats and pull them down and back in a reverse shrug, not retracting your shoulder blades, but down and back. Again, like you're trying to use your rear delts to give yourself a belly hug. But the more you can bring in your lats and lock them down means the less travel there's gonna be in that bar as you apply force into the floor, which is gonna lead to a much bigger and stronger deadlift, as well as a much safer back position for you. But again, I'm gonna talk a lot more in depth about this in part 2 of this series. And the third thing that I wanna talk to you guys about bringing in is going to be your chin, or really this whole head thing we got going on. The problem here is that when things get particularly heavy, especially on the squat or the deadlift, and we don't know if we're gonna get it, inside our heads, quickly we forget about all the cues, and all we start saying is up, 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 because that's where you want the bar to go, right? You just want that bar to keep moving. The problem is, as these thoughts arise in our head, typically your chin goes up too, which is problematic. Guilty. But the problem is, as your chin starts to drift away, you will lose spinal integrity, it will pull you out of alignment, and you will absolutely be weaker in this position than you are with a neutral spine. This is not a powerful position. So just like a fighter, you need to keep your chin down and engaged so your spine can stay neutral and you can perform as optimally as possible. If you guys have a big problem with this, I have an entire video about it where you can take a rolled up towel and place it underneath your chin and hold it there while you're deadlifting, or even a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball or something. Anything that's gonna keep your chin in this position. You don't want it tucked all the way down, because again, you're not in a neutral spine position at that point, but you definitely don't want it up either. So being able to find a neutral spine position with your neck is massive. Now, also in that same exact vein is something that I actually discovered in recording a video with Mark Bell last year. If you're lucky enough to see it, Mark and I are deadlifting together, and I'm going, and he asked basically why I'm sticking my fat head so far over the bar, and I had no idea what he was talking about. Number one, my head's not that fat, and number two, I really didn't realize I was doing this wrong. But the basic idea here is, if when you go to deadlift, if you are throwing your head way out over top the bar, your head is a heavy object. It's a lot heavier than you're thinking it is. And in order to achieve lockout, you're gonna have to remedy that weight that you threw out over top the bar and bring it all the way back, which can be a long distance. Now in that video, Mark explains that I should be packing my chin back so that my head is actually sitting on top of my spine. I tried it and I was absolutely astounded by the results. You can see it on the video. I was dumbfounded because weights felt immediately lighter. There was an instant change just because of this big stupid noggin being in a different position. So the basic idea here is the last thing that I do right before I pull the bar, slacks out, everything is ready to go, is I will throw my chin back. Almost like if someone asks you like a ridiculous question, you're like, what? Like that motion, or just trying to make it look like you have double chins. Packing your chin like that is just gonna move it back slightly, because this is a game of inches, guys. If that bar is 1 inch out over top the middle of your foot, if it gets 1 more inch away from your body, 1 more inch higher, 1 more inch lower, everything changes. So it matters. So your head position and reining it in and bringing it in, keeping your chin neutral, along with bringing your head back, can do a lot. Anyway, guys, that is what I have for you today. That is part 1 of this 3-part series. And guys, I'm really, really stoked about this, because oftentimes these small changes are what yield the biggest results. So again, if you are doing awesome on your deadlift and you are just climbing, do not mess with it. It's not worth changing things. Just keep going until you start doing something wrong, because eventually it will happen. It happens to all of us, right? But if you're very much like me and you're a little discouraged by your deadlift progress, or you've hit a little bit of a stall or plateau, then maybe try some of these things and maybe you'll be shocked at what happens. But one thing's for sure, if you keep doing the same exact thing, expecting different results, typically that doesn't work. Typically the same thing that got us into the problem isn't gonna be the thing that gets us out of the problem. So trying new things can oftentimes do amazing things for athletes. Guys, I thank you so much for watching. I thank you so much for the support. If you guys do need any help with any program or anything like that, make sure you email me at NEVERsate@gmail.com. We'll talk about it, we'll get it done. It'll be awesome. Otherwise, I will catch up with you guys with part 2, hopefully very, very soon. Until I do go out to something amazing with you guys, keep working hard, people. Be nice to each other, please. I'll see you then.